Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Podcast. Today, I'm here with my good friend and quite possibly my spirit animal, Mr. Rick Lang, joining me from Pronto Connects. Rick and I have had the opportunity to work together for a number of different years on many different communications-related projects. And as I've been exploring and trying to better understand SMS, MMS, RCS, and what the text messaging world is going to look like over the next couple of years, Rick's the first guy that I call. So, Rick, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing your insights with our audience. I appreciate the opportunity to yet again learn from you.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate being here. And, of course, immediately you distracted me with the whole spirit animal thing. Now I'm just like, what, what kind of a spirit animal would I be? And I got to say, if I was one animal, like if I'm a tiger, then you're a lion, or if I'm like a badger, then you're a beaver, right? We would have way too many. I don't know if you want me to put that
Very, very similar. And but honestly, Rick, that's what makes it so much fun to learn from you and to work with you through these years and all the consulting projects that we've had the opportunity to touch together, and all the successes we've been able to bring for those clients.
Yeah,
Rick, for anyone who has not been as lucky as me to be your friend through the years, could you tell everyone a little about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
I don't know if we have enough time for that full story. I saw a few of your other podcasts, so there's almost like a bar that has to be set, right? I've seen some of the other stories, and I'll tell you the real story, and I'll make it super short. It actually started in Chicago. I grew up in Chicago. Huge, most everybody knows that I'm a huge Chicago Bears fan. But honestly, I was working in the city one day. I was driving home, and as I'm getting off on my exit to go home, there was a guy there, and he's like pulled over on the side of the road. And I will make this short and sweet, I swear. The side of the road, the guy's broken down, so it's cold outside. So I pull over, and I'm like, "Hey, man, do you need a ride?" And so yeah, a guy needs a ride. So he gets in. We're driving like about a mile, and I look over at him, and I'm like, "Is your name Ben?" And he looks over at me and he's like, "Rick?" And no kidding, it turns out, I swear to God, it turns out that this guy was my childhood friend. He lived 2 houses down from me. So from like first grade to fourth grade, this was my homie. And then I never saw him again, right? So long story short, he's a college DJ. He hates being on the air. He gets, has panic attacks, anxiety. And so he's failing this class. And so I basically said, "Yo, I'll go on the air for you. I'll pretend to be you." So for an entire year, I pretended to be a DJ, pretended to be Ben Yackley. And I loved it. I had tons of fun, like got, rave reviews, but it was me on the radio. And so I wanted to go and be a DJ. My grandfather told me, when I asked him for money, he told me to pound sand. So he's like, "Why don't you get a sales job?" So I tried to get a sales job. Couldn't get anybody to hire me. And I wanted to sell cars. Nobody would hire me. The only company that would hire me was AT&T. And so this is like, think 97. And so basically I started work for AT&T, just knocked it out of the park, came up in the ranks in Chicago. They moved me to Kentucky. I was a sales manager there. And then they started deregulating markets. And, what happened then was I started running into people on the street. And, one day I was following behind, MCI, they were selling like 14 cents per minute long distance. I had like 15. And so then, I ran up these guys, and I was gonna get into it with them because they were taking all my sales because they were literally a block ahead of me. And so it turns out these guys were agents. And I was like, "Well, what is that?" And so come to find out, you could work directly for AT&T, or you could be an independent, or you could work directly for the long distance carriers, or you could be an independent agent. And so as soon as I realized that, I started my first company when I was 20. And, I took over the Nashville market. And what we did was I went down there as independent contractors. And I started off down there with AT&T. That AT&T, contract led to a contract with Home Depot, with Target, Columbia House Records. So we would go to all the college campuses and sign up people for CDs, right? That whole thing. I ran that company for 5 years and sold it. Went back to Chicago. Thought I was going to get into securities. I got all my securities licenses, my Series 6, my 63, my 65. Passed that test. Passed it on the first try. Is that what it's a 65, right?
I think so. I don't have any securities licenses.
It's the hardest test that you'll ever take in your life if you decide to do it. And that's probably one of my greatest achievements is that I actually passed it on the first try because it's insane. So I built up a business in financial, like as a broker, moved to Colorado and just, moved here to, enjoy the mountains and snowboarding and just being outside. And I didn't want to work on the weekends. So I got back into technology and, make a long story short, started my second company in 2007 in the collections industry. I worked for Touchstar Software, which was some people may know that name because they were a pretty big player in the collection space, probably 2000, 2005 timeframe. I started working with them and I built out their PBX kind of services. There was called Touchstar Connect, and that was like a hosted services model. But I wrote the business plan for them and that division, and we went to market selling an all-in-one solution, right? So we would do your contact center, your voice, your data services, and a PBX. And it was a huge success. People loved the idea of having a single point of accountability, having, a single vendor that eliminated the finger pointing between, all of those services. And so it was a pretty big, they had issues with their funding. So, I told the owner, I said, hey, I wrote this was, my plan. I wrote the business model for it and I'm going to take it. And so I started Single Source. Single Source was, we followed that business model. And as the industry changed and as technology changed, so did we. I think we I think we rebranded Single Source like, 3 different times as far as our approach to the market. But with each one of those approaches, I learned more and more about the technology behind it. We started as just like a, referral type of a relationship with the different carriers. And then we, just did more and more volume. And so then it made sense to bring all of those services in-house and start managing them in-house, which is a whole different animal, right? It's easy to provide support when it's not your stuff. You know what I mean? When you're not, when you're just basically collecting a commission, that's kind of easy. It's when it's you've got, the technology in house and then, you're responsible for all that. When you're running that type of a shop, you're definitely very, very careful on the commitments that you make to your customers because, you gotta back it up. Right. So we
Makes
sold
sense.
that. So that business continued to grow, and we had a lot of fun and established a lot of great relationships in the collection space. What happened there was, and this is a good story to tell real quick. I was having dinner with my girls, my family, and my phone rang, and my girls lost their mind. But they're both like, "Oh my God, Dad!" And it's like, "What? Your phone?" And I'm like, what? It rang. Who cares? Well, oh God, it's like they were so embarrassed that my phone rang. And like at first I was pissed off because I was like, shut up, it's like, who cares? But then I'm looking at their faces and it's like, well, what do you do? And so my oldest daughter, who is insanely intelligent, off the charts, she's she's so intelligent that she, lacks social skills. She
I can
that's a
understand that.
fact, this right? Like you either got it or
I
you don't.
understand.
He's that intelligent. Anyways, so she's like, well, me and my friends are on Discord and this, that, and the other. And then I'm like, really? And so she starts telling me her and her friends were on two platforms and they're communicating. And I'd never heard of Discord at that time. And this is like, 10 years ago. And then my other daughter, who's very intelligent as well, but she's also a cheerleader. She, was the vice president of her jazz club. And then, also in theater and costume design, all that stuff. Well, what do you do? Well, they're on Snapchat, they're on Instagram, TikTok, right? That's how they communicate. And so in that moment, it dawned on me that, okay, wait, I've got my two daughters are collectively communicating with their friends on 5 different channels. And then it's like, they both, one was a junior, the other one was a senior. I'm like, they're going into college. And then within 5 years, they're going to be in the workforce, right? And so it dawned on me, it's like, I am, I should be embarrassed that I'm looking at voice as the primary, means of communication. So immediately I was like, we need to change. Right. That was that pivotal moment where I was like, the communication, channels are going to change. The way that we communicate is going to
Mhm.
change. And if my girls are sitting at a table and they're so embarrassed because my phone rang, do you think they're going to answer their phone when somebody calls them? So that was when I was like, we got to change our whole model. And so then that leads to Pronto Connects, which is essentially we're a communications platform as a service. And so our infrastructure, we're in two different environments. We're in AWS and Cloudflare, right?
Mhm.
Geo redundant, active environment, right? All the fun stuff. But as a communication platform as a service, we have all of those channels. So whether it's voice, whether it's email, whether it's chat, whether you and I were talking about social medias earlier, we have Facebook, we
Mhm.
have WhatsApp, we have Instagram, we have all of those already built into our platform. So when they become relevant to the collection space, we'll be ready. So that's
Which
the
is
long.
happening faster than I would ever
Yeah,
expect. Like, we're moving into
yeah,
these new communication technologies. And as you talk about the generations communicating differently, I know I've talked in the podcast before about the giant differences between the way that my wife and I communicate. So,
yeah,
like, we're down here in Brazil. When she's communicating with her friends, she's recording a voicemail and she's messaging it via
yeah.
WhatsApp to her friend who's listening to the voice, and they're going back and forth with this. Then there's me who hasn't listened to a voicemail since like 1996. Like, send me, you want to communicate with me, send me a text message and we'll talk if there's a necessary reason. But just thinking about how everybody's using things a little bit differently, and even how the channels themselves have started to change, because we started off with SMS. And I mean, at least when I started with SMS, it was, hit the 3 button 4 times to get a letter, right? And this is how
Yeah,
we
right, right.
started. And
I
now
think
it's kind of moved on.
that was a
Now
flip
we've
phone.
got it was a flip phone. Now we've got like MMS, right? So we started moving into having deeper, longer communication capabilities, right? We're not getting blocked into two messages when we say too much. But I think, honestly, I think SMS messaging really did help our society think about what they needed to say. Just like how when we used to pay for minutes, we used to think about what we were going to talk about. We'd have an agenda
Yeah, dude.
before we called our family on the other side of the world.
Yeah,
And
totally.
now people just talk and talk and talk. But we had to learn how to communicate in these much smaller chunks of content, which I think is still a challenge that we're facing today as the industry. So then we go into MMS and things become a little bit richer.
Mhm.
And now we're going into RCS. It's night and day compared to what we communicate with from an SMS standpoint. Now, this is just what I understand in terms of the limited stuff that I've done from a consulting standpoint, and the phones that are sitting on my desk and how I should be using them. But help the audience understand what's really the difference between these channels and why should they care as debt collectors.
SMS is, in our opinion, or my opinion, it's your kind of like what you just said. It's short communication, right? It's short, sweet,
Notifications over communication.
totally. And as a society, SMS is perfect, and really text messaging as a whole is perfect because everybody wants everything right now, right? They want to know right now. They want, everybody wants instant gratification, and so I think that we kind of missed that point, and nobody takes advantage of that, right? So with SMS, those are your short, like those to me, those are payment notifications. Those are just really just short messages. I don't really think that SMS is your vehicle for establishing credibility. I don't think it's where I don't think you should use it really as your only method of communication, especially in the collection space. So, I look at SMS as, like you just said, payment reminders, two-factor authentication, short, sweet, just messages. We're trying to get in touch with you, right? Those type of things. MMS to me, it's so misunderstood and it's so underutilized, right? Because MMS is your opportunity to establish credibility. And that's the thing that, again, I think most people in the space overlook. With MMS, this is where you want to say, hey, we are such and such agency. We're reaching out to you regarding such and such, account that you had. Here's the last, 4 digits of that account number. Here's the balance. If you can send a few MMS messages first, it allows you the chance to establish credibility, right? The consumer and the general public, they've been conditioned to be weary of any URL, anybody that's asking for payment. right? And so the biggest mistake that we see is people are like, SMS, I'm going to send you this quick message that says, hey, you owe us money, pay here. I'm not going to that link. You know what I mean?
Nobody is. Yeah.
Nobody is,
Why
right? And
would
it's
you? Why would you?
it's like once a year as companies, we're supposed to train our employees, don't click on links, right? And then we're going around and telling the agencies, send out SMS messages with your payment link. No, you need to send out MMS messages, establish that credibility so that the consumer starts to, so they recognize your name, so they recognize the phone number, right? And that's kind of the other thing with an MMS message, you can send your logo, right? You don't have to wait for RCS. You could send your logos today via MMS, right? And that's where I think a lot of the like attorneys and law firms think they're missing the mark with that one as well, because attorneys have very unique names. When you get a letter from an attorney, you know right off the bat who Johnson's so and so and so and so is. They're coming to get you because you owe money. You should be putting your logo.
Could be a band. You never know.
Yeah, could be. There's enough of those around. But that logo or that MMS, that's your opportunity, right? To send your logo, to send your full name and not get charged, 2 messages. MMS should be your model validation notices. Like there's a huge opportunity because with MMS, you're not limited to characters like with SMS. And that's the other thing with SMS. A lot of people don't recognize or realize that you're limited to 160 characters. And if you go over 160 characters, that's 2 messages. If you put an emoji in an SMS, that changes the codec of the message. And then that automatically separates it out into two messages. There's actual,
Interesting.
and there's actually, the other thing that's crazy is that there's actual font. Like people will send us, agencies will send us templates. And then what we do is we'll run those templates through essentially a decoder. And basically that will tell us the character count, but it will also tell us if when they wrote that template and, when they put it into the Excel spreadsheet or when they uploaded it, when they send it over to us, if they're using a font that doesn't correlate or won't be received in the right way from the mobile providers, that font will trigger additional, and it'll make it 2 segments.
That's really interesting. It reminds me of like sometimes you see a text message come across and it almost looks like it comes from a Cyrillic alphabet or something else.
Yeah.
Like you can tell that it doesn't match everything else that you receive. And
Yeah.
my gut immediately goes scam.
Totally.
Scam.
No, you're
This
right.
is coming from the Eastern Bloc. This is a scam.
And you know what else it does is you have to be very careful about, you have to really look at your messages, and what you have to look for is character count, but then also you have to recognize that with a 10 DLC number opposed to a short code, there's different spam filters, right? So with the 10 DLC, we could get somebody, if we have all the information, we can get their brand and campaign approved 7 to 10 business days, right? On a short code, it's 4 to 6 weeks. That 4 to 6 week time frame is the mobile providers doing their due diligence. They're vetting out the company. They're vetting out your campaign. They're digging into your use case. And then when they approve it, they give you more freedom on the back end. You have greater throughput, right? You have less spam filters after the fact because the mobile providers have done their due diligence on the front end. If you're doing a 10 DLC, right? When I'm talking about, hey, we can get this up and running in 7 to 10 days, great. Like you can do that and we can get it up and running very quickly, but you have to know that then on the back end, they're monitoring those messages. You're going through additional spam filters and they're scrubbing and looking at your messages for keywords, for anything that seems fishy or shady. And so going back to that whole thing with the font, if you're pushing a font that's not standard, well, that's going to get caught by the spam filters, and they're going to think the same thing that you think, which is, oh, this is somebody scamming me, right? And then they're immediately going to put you this spam filter, which I feel like I'm rambling, but that's a whole nother thing is just because it was delivered, but where on the device were you delivered? We deliver to the
Well, this
spam.
comes into iOS 26, right? And we start thinking about how now everything, even unknown callers versus potential spam, is all separated, and you don't necessarily know. It's similar to email. Like, you know, if you were delivered, but because you did not receive a bounce back, but you don't know if you made it past the spam filter or not. I think that brings up some really good points, but I know at different points in time, as a industry, we've had significant challenges with debt collection related communications through short codes or even through the standard SMS. Are we still viewed as subpar by the carriers themselves, or has that corrected itself over time?
That's a great question. You know what it is? One of the things that we've learned is that it's really comes down to relationships. And I know that's not your answer. That's not what you're looking to hear, but
That's actually it's a very realistic. What I'm looking for is a realistic answer, because that's what our audience wants to understand, is like, what are they truly up against and how do you get past it?
I'm glad that I could tie my previous long-winded story into something. When we
I
with the
told you I
pre-
had questions.
with the previous company, we did a ton of volume on the voice side, right? We had a direct sales, we had an agent model, and then we were a wholesaler, and so we were a back end service provider to a lot of the contact center platforms in the collection space. My last company was a voice provider for them. So with Pronto, it was very easy for us to go back to those same voice providers and say, "Hey, can we add text messaging to our contract, right?" And also because we had those existing relationships, we already knew people within the at AT&T, Verizon, and all the providers. It was very easy to be like, "Hey, talk to me about this. What are your feelings on this?" And so what we learned was that the biggest challenge, or the reason why we're in the situation that we're in today, is because they didn't feel that the providers who were supporting the industry had a handle on how to manage the traffic, right? Those different stop gaps that you have to put in place to make sure that the consumer is respected and that there's credibility. And so what we've done a really good job of is, and this is why I say it's relationships, is going to them, understanding their concerns as a provider, and then building the infrastructure to report back to them. Right. So like everybody's familiar with like the template IDs.
Communication, right? Like, the clarity in the communication is making a significant difference in how they're viewing us as organizations. Because we had similar challenges when it came to the payment rails and MasterCard
Yes.
and Visa trying to make things more and more difficult over time. So it sounds like the transparency is the key.
Yeah, it's really like us, going to them and saying, "Okay, understand your concern," and then opening the kimono and saying, "This is our infrastructure. Here's what we've put in place. Here's the essentially the filters that we have. Here's the metrics that we're tracking," and then basically responding in a very timely fashion. Right? This year, or over in 2025. I've gotten two text messages from two different providers where it was like, "Hey, Rick, such and such account looks like we were getting these spam messages and looks like they're exceeding this." And when they're reaching out to me via text, right? It's not like, I mean, yes, you get the formal email notification, but when you got somebody that's reaching out to you personally saying, "Hey, I saw that this account was exceeding this limit," we already identified it on our side. Because we're matching, we've got the same filters in our place. And so I'm responding and saying, "Yeah, I saw that too. I'm seeing that they're running at a 4.2% in spam, whatever, or opt out, you want to call it. Are you seeing the same thing?" "Yeah." But that me being able to say, "Hey, I see they're at 4.2," they know that we're tracking this. They know that we've got the same, stuff going on and what that does is then, it gives them the confidence that we take this seriously, right? We have a compliance attorney on staff. We have require templates. We have all of these processes and things that we do internally. All of those things I go and promote to our providers. I would say at least quarterly. Just, "Hey, this is what we're doing." I know I'm kind of I'm talking all over the place, but
No, look, it's trust in relationships, Rick. I think
Yeah.
you're bringing it full circle to what we've been talking about, which is like my question was really about, are we still being seen the same way? And it sounds like we've been able to develop the relationships now as an industry and develop the level of trust by doing things the right way. And I think if you look back at 2010 and the debt resale market and other things about the debt collection space, there was a lot more bad news. And I think RMAI certification and other things have played a really positive role towards it. But kind of twisting into kind of my last question for you, Rick, I think the industry is pretty familiar with SMS. We're pretty familiar with MMS. And now we're really starting to see the deployment of RC. It came out in iOS 18 and was supported by iPhone. Now we've moved to iOS 26 where it's clearly supported. And that I think is going to be what we're going to be seeing into the future, like the acceptance of it on more modern devices. What opportunities does the debt collection industry have in leveraging RCS as a communication technology with consumers?
A lot of people ask about RCS, and there's a lot of I don't want to say there's a lot of miscommunication around it, or maybe it's a misunderstanding. It is being released. It is something that right now we're putting an agency into production next week, I think. Pronto ourselves, I'm moving into production on it as well. But to question, when they rolled it out, they made it very, very clear. This is for Fortune 500 companies first. And because the technology is there is so much more functionality, and it is a better consumer experience. They gave it to the Fortune 500 companies first, and
Mhm.
then once they kind of get a chance to capitalize on it, right? And then they'll start kind of opening up the opportunity for others. That doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means at
Mhm.
I'm saying that the beginning of the year, they made it very, very clear. We're not going to give it to anybody else. This is who it's going to. But that wasn't communicated to anybody. What we heard in the market was that everybody's jumping on this. Everybody's like, "Oh, RCS, RCS," and it's like, yeah, well, guys, and it's like you're not even allowed to do it. But with that being said,
Hey, but that's the honest answer that we want to hear about.
yeah, but I think for collections and the industry, I think it's your first party agencies are the one that's gonna those are the ones that we're getting approved. Those are the ones that I see that
Mhm.
that we don't have any issue with. And the reason why I say that is because, again, the biggest value that I think we add with anybody we work with is we truly want to be a partner, and we want to be a resource for you. We want to be a part of your organization, and so that means being honest. Right. So, like, somebody
Mhm.
comes to me and they got third party stuff. I will tell you that with all the first party agencies that we've kind of brought to the table for RCS, all the providers come back and they're like, "Rick, it's not approved for debt collection." And I always respond back, "I know, this is first party." Right. And so then it's creating the business case. It's creating, again, you have to look, this is what we're doing. This is how we're managing the traffic. This is why you want the business. And they're like, "Okay, well, cool, we can do it. But again, no debt collections." And you're like, "Yeah, I know, it's first party, it's payment reminders." And again, being honest with the agency, being honest with the vendors, and just full transparency so everybody can feel comfortable with it. At some point, just like with text messaging, and I think maybe 3 to 6 months, maybe, I don't know, they will open it up and they will start
It's a
accepting
matter
it.
it's a matter of time, but until we can actively start leveraging the technology as an industry.
Yeah,
But it's interesting, and I appreciate the bluntness and the honesty, because that's the real information from someone who's on the phone with the carriers, who has those
yeah,
relationships for the last 20 years, who's been actively engaged in it, versus what I hear in the marketplace and people trying to position themselves, right? It's not available for debt collection. And I think it's important that we follow the rules. We don't trip over it, because then we're going to get blocked and we're not going to have the same
totally.
opportunity in the same time frame that we would have as if we just follow the rules. But for anybody who's watching, I highly suggest, if you have not talked to Rick before, I know he's going to be out at the RMAI conference in February in Las Vegas here in just a couple of weeks. And I don't know if you still got time on your calendar, Rick, but I know you can find him at the networking events, the opening reception, and those kinds of things. But Rick, I really do appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights, spending a little bit of time with me. I learned something from every conversation we have.
Can I make one more comment on RCS and the whole?
Please.
So RCS is the buzz, right? But the truth of the matter is, nope. Again, MMS. It's like we look at the profile of usage across all these agencies. You've got this heavy saturation on SMS because it's the least expensive. People are underutilizing MMS, but then you've got everybody saying, I want RCS. And it's like, you're not even trying to do MMS. And you know what I mean? It's like, you're going to go from like SMS to full blown RCS. It's like, why don't you do MMS right now? Like, you know what I
You
mean?
should crawl before you try to run full speed.
Right. Develop your MMS campaign, develop your overall texting strategy. Cause there's a strategy. There's a way to go about sending out your messages where you can drive revenue far above and beyond what people are doing today. And it's not RCS. It's just understanding MMS more, get that down, and then go to RCS. And by that time, it'll be ready. Now I'll say yes. Let's meet at the upcoming show.
Look, no, I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing
sure.
insights. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask Rick or myself, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. Or if you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, because Rick is a wealth of knowledge, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully I can get Rick back here at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, Rick, I really appreciate it. I'll see you in just a couple of weeks in Vegas.
You bet, brother. Looking forward to it.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. We appreciate your time and attention. We'll see y'all again soon.